Hello, we are Sarah and Ellie, and this is our project. Our question was, how do different amounts of sugar affect the production of CO2 from yeast? We found interest in this question because we wanted to create a recipe for really fluffy bread, and we were wondering how yeast takes part in that. We found that yeast almost consumes sugar after some research, and we wanted to see what ratio of sugar to yeast could create the best fluffy bread.
To understand this concept, we chose the experiment, the yeast balloon experiment. We will use yeast, water, sugar, and a balloon to see how yeast behaves as it ferments. This experiment is conducted using sugar, water, and dry yeast, mixed together in a beaker. The water and sugar will be used as an energy source for the yeast, so the yeast can produce CO2 as waste. If we add more sugar, we want to know if the added sugar will produce more CO2, even if we keep the same amount of yeast. Will the amount of CO2 increase because more sugar has been added, or will the amount of CO2 decrease because there is more sugar than the yeast is able to consume? We put a balloon on top of the beaker so the balloon can catch the carbon dioxide emitted by the yeast when it consumes the sugar. And repeat this, but with more sugar. We can watch as the balloon changes in size, witness the fermentation process, and our result will be knowing whether adding more sugar will result in more CO2. We expect the sugar to dampen the amount of CO2 produced because there is too much sugar and not enough yeast.
These are our results. They showed that 1 tablespoon of sugar was the most effective in almost all the trials. Our observation for 1 tablespoon was that there was no rising shown at the start, and the last 5 minutes were when the most CO2 is produced. For 2 tablespoons, there was not as high and 1 tablespoon of sugar, but had more rising during the whole 15 minutes. The rising was pretty gradual, and at the last few seconds, it would bounce up. For 3 tablespoons, there is not much difference, and most of the movement was seen during the last few minutes.
The figure 1 and 2 shows one of our trials with the balloons filled with carbon dioxide. Figure 3 and 4 shows us using the displacement method to measure the mass. Figure 5 shows us applying what we learned and baking the bread. If the same or a similar amount of sugar to the amount of CO2 is added, we found that the CO2 is produced the most. Each bit of yeast consumes each bit of sugar. Also, if there is too much sugar, it begins to absorb the moisture, taking nutrition away from the yeast.
We also found that yeast does not produce as much CO2 when there is more sugar. The increased amount of sugar gives the yeast too much to consume, and the excess sugar dampens the effect of the yeast.
Thank you for listening.